Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and welcome to the 2021 Goldwater Scholar Community's NSF-GRFP Webinar. My name is Nina, and I am the chair of the Webinars Committee this year, and I want to welcome you tonight to this wonderful event where we'll be able to talk to some NSF-GRFP recipients, as well as the past director of the program. So we're very lucky to have all of our panelists here tonight. We'll go ahead and just have everybody introduce themselves, and we will start off here. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to share insights into GRFP, a program which I led for 10 years at the National Science Foundation. So I'm just really happy to be here and share. I was not an applicant. I didn't know about it as an undergrad or as a grad student. So that's probably something I will always regret. And I'm just really glad that I can share information with you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Meacham. I'm a first-year grad student in the Material Science Department at MIT, and I did my undergrad at Clarkson University in chemical engineering. And as a little fun fact, I came to this webinar last year while I was in the application process, so it is actually really helpful.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa J. I am currently a PhD student, 5th year in biostatistics at the University of Iowa, and I received the Goldwater Scholarship in 2015, and then went ahead and applied for the NSF Fellowship during a gap year that I took between undergrad and graduate school, and I found that to be a good time to apply, and I'm happy to talk about gap years or anything like that in addition. And currently my research interests are in Bayesian statistics and spatiotemporal statistics. I did my undergrad at Colorado College and I studied math there.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellen. I'm a second-year PhD student in biostatistics, so you're getting glances at the biostatistics students at different points in the path. Before coming to the Harvard School of Public Health, I did my undergrad at University of Colorado at Boulder, majoring in applied mathematics. And my research is kind of in the environmental health space, so actually a lot of similar kind of statistical areas to Melissa. And I guess I should mention that I was a 2019 Goldwater Scholar and applied for the NSF during my senior year of undergrad.
Hey everyone, I'm Cody Ritt. So I'm a 5th year PhD student at Yale University now, not in biostatistics. I'm now in the Chemical and Environmental Engineering department. So background, I got my BS and MS in civil engineering from North Dakota State University, where I focused on phosphate sorbent remediation. Now my research is actually quite a bit different. I do applied nanofluidics and fundamental membrane transport research. A little bit of fun facts. So I won the Goldwater Scholarship in 2015 and the NSF-GRFP in 2016. However, I was actually not really so much planning on going to graduate school. It was actually a very low percentage chance for me. And I ended up winning the GRFP in 2016, even though I had actually already accepted a job offer in industry. And as you can tell, I did not take that job offer. I had to go back on that and to come here to Yale. So it completely changed my life. And so now here I am presenting to you guys.
We're just going to have a brief presentation to give a little bit of background on the fellowship, and please take it away.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to, you will have access to these slides afterwards, and there's a lot of useful information and hyperlinks and all that in here. So I'll go through this quickly so we can really get to your questions, but sometimes it's helpful to go through the material to trigger questions. So NSF is an amazing place, and I hope that it'll become part of your life like Goldwater. And GRFP has been around since 1952. So over 60,000 fellows have been supported, and joining this group is a very illustrious way to become a scientist or engineer. Now, interestingly, if you want some really good help on finding out what kind of research is going on in your particular field, chemical engineering, bioengineering, biology, whatever it is, sociology, go to the NSF website, which is nsf.gov, and click on the awards tab and search awards for things in your topic area. And you will find the latest scientists who are proposing in your field, and you will also read what they think their intellectual merit and what their broader impacts are, which are the two criteria that are used not only for all NSF proposals, but also for GRFP. So it's a great resource. It's also a great way to find places to go to graduate school. So I really recommend that award feature. It's really good. Okay, so GRFP is goals are to select and support early career individuals, and also to broaden participation in science and engineering in certain fields, women who are underrepresented, people who are members of underrepresented groups, people with disabilities, and veterans. So the two goals are always kept in mind by the reviewers. And one thing you should always think about is you have to demonstrate your potential to be a scientist or engineer very clearly in your application. So the fellowships awarded to you, even if you wrote a research statement about what you were going to study, you don't have to do it. So it's your choice of project, your choice of advisor and graduate program, and you could use it to start a master's, move on to a PhD, or do both degrees, or just do a master's. You get 3 years of funding, and it's very flexible in terms of your graduate degree. Now, you do have to use it at a US institution. You can't go overseas with that. Now, the really exciting news is this year, if Congress passes the budget, we still don't know, the plan is to award 2,500. That's unprecedented. It's a huge number of fellowships. So you should definitely apply. It's a great number and very exciting for the program. So you get 3 years of support. During those 3 years, everyone, no matter where you are, you get the same stipend. And then there's a cost of education allowance, which covers your tuition and required fees for that year. So everything is in this document. There's a hyperlink to it here. It's a very boring document. There's a lot of detail and repetition, but this has all of the information you need. So read this carefully. Look at the application deadlines because they differ by field of study. Everything is in here that you need to know to prepare a good application. Okay, now you do have to meet certain requirements. You have to be a US citizen, national, or permanent resident. You do have to be doing a research-based master's and or doctoral degree, and in science and engineering fields, and also in STEM education. And you do have to go to graduate school by the fall, like Cody found out, okay? Now, there is an eligibility questionnaire that you can go to check if you're eligible. It's worth noting that there are 4 different academic levels: seniors and people who are in their gap years, who have never enrolled in a graduate degree program, and then first-year grad students or second year. And you get to apply as a senior, and then you get to apply again as a graduate student, either in your first or second year. If you are in a gap year, you can actually apply every single year. There was someone who applied 6 times, I remember. So you can apply, you can keep applying if you're not in a graduate program, unlimited. But once you are in one, you can only apply once as either a first year or a second year. And if you have a master's and you are in the workforce, you get 1 chance to apply. If you've had a gap of 2 years, you can go back to graduate school for a PhD, and that's level 4. Okay, so these are the fields of study that are listed here. And I know there was a question about what if I'm interested in 4 or 5 different fields of study? You can actually list multiple fields and the percentage of your time that you want to be, that you're thinking will contribute to your graduate degree. But keep in mind that this is used to put you into a panel with reviewers. So if you're 50% computer and information science and 50% chemistry, you are going to have to pick whether chemists or computer scientists are going to read your application. So, so look at this list as these are the people who are going to review me. And I do have every intention of going into a program in that field, still keeping in mind that you can be interdisciplinary. So this is actually the distribution of awards from last year, and engineering is the largest percentage of the awards with over 30%, and life sciences, and that's been that way for many years. It's really well subscribed to by engineers and biologists, and much less so by other fields. That doesn't mean that you should be an engineer or a biologist. It just means there are fewer applications in those areas. There is something new this year, high priority research areas. And this hyperlink goes to a letter that's from the White House that talks about science and engineering initiatives sponsored by NSF. So that's kind of interesting to read. It actually, for me, when I read it, was not very enlightening as to giving direction. So basically what you should do in choosing your field of study is pick your passion, what you want to do and what you're interested in. Okay, now if you're in a professional degree program, that's not eligible. And also because of the National Institutes of Health, research that's directly health related, disease related is not supported because NIH would be the place for you to go. But for instance, if you were doing a project on cell division, where you're trying to understand how cells fundamentally divide, that would be acceptable as long as your main focus was not to study cancer. Okay, so it's the fundamental biological process is okay, but the health related goal is not acceptable. Okay, so basically this is the timeline. We're coming close. You should all be working on your applications. Pretty much after the application is due, you've got reference letters due, and then I put in red apply to grad school because of cases of people who didn't. And then you get to start the fellowship year either in the summer or the fall. If you're in grad school already, you can start it early, but if you're not, then you would start it in the fall. Okay, so what does this compose of? You're actually going to write 5 pages. That's it. So you're going to write a 3-page personal statement and a 2-page graduate research statement. You're going to enter a lot of other information under this personal information. All of you are Goldwater scholars. You've done this. You've already been through this process. So basically, I almost think it's easier than applying for Goldwater. So, so I think it shouldn't be too difficult for you to take what you prepared for Goldwater and then work on it to prepare it for GRFP. So if you don't get 3 letters of recommendation, they will review with 2, but I would say definitely get 3 letters. Okay, so the 2 merit review criteria are intellectual merit and broader impacts. And the reviewers are going to write a paragraph about your intellectual merit, and they're going to write one about your broader impacts. And that's why I said it's useful to go look at the NSF Awards database and actually see what researchers in your field are proposing for these 2 things, because that can help you sort of calibrate for your particular discipline as to what's important in intellectual merit and broader impacts. But of course, for both of these have to be things that you care about and that you want to do. So being very genuine about your interests and what you would like to do is really important. Okay, so there's a lot of advice here, which you will have the slides. But, you know, things that also fit into Goldwater, you know, how well you work independently, what's your contribution to a research project, have you taken initiative, solved problems, you know, so basically you want to know that you're a person of high ability who is going to succeed as a scientist. And then the other one is, how interesting is your proposed research? Is it something new and interesting to people, relevant, or is it something, you know, that's just trivial and not going to be that interesting? So you want to you want to excite the reviewers about what you propose to do. So and then for broader impacts, that's where you get to think about what you have done for society. Have you done outreach? Have you worked with different groups of people? Maybe it's your impact on society, or it could also be the impact of your research, the potential impact of your research on society, why it's important. If you want to work on water and water conservation, that's clearly a big issue, or climate change. These are big issues of importance to society. So NSF does not prescribe what the societal benefits should be. They say these may include, but they're not limited to. So the idea here is you get to pick what you want to talk about and what you want to do, but what you don't want to do is propose a whole lot of things for which you have no background or experience. You have to propose genuine activities here. So this is really important as well, because the reviewers are going to look at your broader impacts and your intellectual merit. Okay, so in your personal statement, tell your story and demonstrate your potential for research. You know, if your transcripts are really bad, or, you know, there's some grades there that you're not too pleased about, but there was some aspect of your life story that caused that lower grade, you can talk about it here. So you overcame adversity. You had a major life issue that you succeeded over. So basically, some of those could have contributed to your motivation and preparation for pursuing a STEM career. So the idea here is, who are you? Why are you passionate about science? And where do you see yourself going in the future? And again, the story has to be complete across all of your application. So thinking holistically about your whole application, this is one area where you get to focus on your personal story, but your research statement should support your personal story too. Okay, so the research plan is 2 pages. And again, it isn't something that you have to do, but it's where the reviewers are going to say, oh, how does this person think about science? Do they propose a really interesting idea? Are the hypotheses testable? Do they have alternate hypotheses if something doesn't work? So basically, it's showing how you think like a scientist. And here, if you're on a panel like with chemistry, there may be chemists who study chemistry education all the way to chemists in a very specialized field. So you want to be able to communicate for the non-specialist in your research statement. Okay, you can list up to 5 reference letters. And what you really want them to see is what you've written. You want them to understand what intellectual merit and broader impacts are, and you want them to talk about that. You want them to be fully engaged with you in the process of applying. That's really important. So they need to know who you are and really talk about you. If you think about it, you have 3 reference writers and they can each write 2 pages. There can be 6 pages of references versus your 5. So this is an amazing way for the reviewers to learn more about you through your reference writers. So they're really important part of the application. You can list up to 5 because we recognize that not everyone will submit on time. And so, for instance, if number 2 doesn't submit, number 3 moves into number 2 slot, and number 4 moves into number 3. Only 3 letters will be part of your application, the top 3 ranked ones that were submitted. Okay, so preparing a competitive application, read the solicitation. The NSF-GRFP website, which is a .org site, has a lot of information there. Go back to your Goldwater application and build on it to describe your more current honors, experiences, presentations, publications. You should definitely be talking about that you're a Goldwater scholar. That's an amazing honor. Work with your reference letter writers, and you can tell when they have submitted their letters, and that's important for you to stay on top of that. And again, address NSF's merit review criteria, and get people to read your drafts of your research statement and also your personal statement. And think about it that a reviewer is reading 20 to 30 of these. So how do you make yourself stand out and be different and be someone that the National Science Foundation should invest in? So that's really, you want to make it easy for them to understand who you are and why you should be funded by this program. So that's it, and I kept to my time, yay. So we have time for lots of questions. These are some resources here, and then also what I added on the last slide are some fellows have provided a lot of advice. And one fellow, Alex Hunter Lang, has a database where people have uploaded their personal statements and research statements, so you can look at those, or their ratings or reviews, so you can take a look at those. Again, it's only a resource to get a sense. You should be writing about you. You should not be copying anyone. You should be very authentic and sincere in what you write. But there are some good resources and advice that you can go to. So I'm going to stop there, and then we can open it up to questions. All right.
Perfect. Thank you so very much, Gisèle, for all those really wonderful insights. And I'm seeing that we already have quite a few questions that are coming in. And to everyone listening, I just want to reiterate that we will make these slides available to everyone with all of these extremely helpful tips. So no worries on that end. That will be distributed here towards the end of the webinar. So we'll just go ahead and hop in here into our Q&A session now. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions through our Google form. So we'll start off by going through those, and then we will continue to monitor everything in the chat and continue asking questions. So our very first question is from Alvaro, and he asks, how should I decide which research experiences to include? I've recently participated in a few labs that aren't directly related to what I specify as my research direction. Would including those experiences show a lack of direction? Or should I put in as many as I can to show my enthusiasm? And I will go ahead and direct these questions to Melissa and Rebecca.
All right, I can get started. So I think that it's good to really emphasize the skills that you've gotten out of all of your research experiences. So I had a few research experiences in my personal statement that I mentioned that weren't directly related to my project, but I did get presentation experience from those, and other experience that really, really helped me as a researcher. So I would suggest including those and really talking about what you got from them as a researcher.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be bad to include everything. I don't think it would show like lack of direction as long as you're like talking about it in a cohesive manner and not just saying like, oh, I did X, Y, Z. Like Melissa was saying, you really want to tie in what you got from them. And then if you can tie all of that into like your research interests or your background, I think that would be helpful.
Great, thank you for those responses. Now we'll move on to a question from Max, who asks, how does the choice of major field of study constrain what departments you can apply to? If your proposal is interdisciplinary and suitable for different departments, in his specific case, he's talking about math/statistics and CS departments, does the choice major fields of study force you to pick one? So I will go ahead and direct this question to Gisèle and Cody.
Okay, well, I think I tried to address it a little bit in my comments. There is a requirement that you stay sort of within your major field of study in graduate school, at least for the first year. And then you can change if you want to. So for instance, you could do, you could enroll in an engineering program and then switch to a computer science after a year or so of graduate school. But the idea is that they don't want sort of a lot of switches. You know, we're kind of saying this is the investment for the engineers, this is the investment for the life sciences. So, so you can be interdisciplinary, but you will have to pick a graduate program that kind of fits with that major category. And you will, again, that's who's going to review you. So if you come across as a computer scientist and the chemists are reviewing you, they're probably not going to support your application very strongly.
Yeah, so everything Gisèle said is great for that. Especially it's really important about who's going to be reviewing your application. But from just a, you know, what kind of department you want to work with, because a lot of times a big consideration is who you want to work with, more so than the actual like department. And that was the case for me. So I actually applied to 3 different departments, all the same field of study. I would still be focusing on membrane science in all 3 of them, but one of them was a material science department. The other was a civil engineering department. And then the one I ended up in is a chemical engineering department. So I wouldn't necessarily, you know, be too afraid of being pigeonholed into what you apply for, because as Gisèle said, it is very flexible, especially after the first year. The NSF-GRFP is generally very like accommodating.
Wonderful. All right. Now moving on to a question from Grace, who asks, how can you gauge whether your interests are too disease-oriented to be eligible to apply? Are there legitimate and ethical ways to make basic science projects that hopefully will eventually lead to the treatment or prevention of a disease not appear too disease-oriented? And she specifically mentions that she works in the field of chronic pain for reference. So because this is, again, kind of a more technical question, I will go ahead and direct this to Gisèle and then Ellen.
So this, as I mentioned, the NIH supports that kind of work. So NSF is really looking for fundamental research, and you definitely don't want to misrepresent yourself. I mean, you should really say what it is that you're planning to study and want to do. And it really does have to be a fundamental biological question. It cannot be, I think it could be a bit of a red flag for being, you know, if you're in a department where everybody studies chronic pain, I don't know, but you know, there are other avenues for funding from NIH, but as I said, if you study a fundamental biological question, you should be okay. I would do the eligibility questionnaire there's a link to in the presentation. And there's some FAQs that talk about clinical versus basic research. So there are some resources, and you can also talk to the program directors about it if you're still confused.
Great. Yeah, I'll just add, I feel like Melissa and I probably both have, we're in an interesting position here because biostatistics is kind of, statistics, but most often applied to health and medical questions. And so at least when I was applying, I did feel like I was kind of balancing how to present the work that I was doing because, a lot of the statistics, methodological research is much more in the math and statistics camp. But a lot of the motivations and a lot of what motivates me personally is more of the health and the societal application. And so I feel like maybe making that distinction between the technical aspects of your work and then kind of the more or the technical methodologies and then the more like applied aspects of your work and highlighting like maybe the health or societal component as the motivation for you personally can help to frame that.
And Ellen, just to kind of follow up on that question. So I think this is actually really helpful insight to kind of divide like the technical approach to then the broader impact. Do you think that, if you frame your research as like a basic mathematical or statistical project, but then focus on kind of the health ramifications in that broader impact statement, do you think that that's like a feasible or reasonable way to present that kind of work?
I think everyone's probably going to be in a slightly different point in the spectrum. I feel like everything that I do, all the technical questions that I found most interesting are motivated by the application. So for me personally, like there are very few things that I'm going to be working on if there isn't some sort of application. Whereas I realize there are many other fields of, basic research that, don't necessarily have like an immediate end application area. So I feel like really it helps to be honest and also try to kind of tie together your motivation or that balance between the technical research and then your motivations with the things that you've done in the past. So if it can connect with various like activities that you've done or I think it does help to try and tell the story of where this is going to fit in, especially as you said, because the panel of reviewers are going to be not necessarily experts in your specific research area.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Next, we have a question from Blake, who asks, I am ultimately interested in a career in working with early stage biotechs, maybe as a founder in business. Will it affect my chances to mention I don't ultimately want a career in academia, but would still want to be a biotech founder? These are different, let's see, additionally, will it hurt my chances to mention that I want to ultimately end up in more financial parts of biotech? So I guess the more general question for everyone is, will it hurt an applicant if they talk about wanting to pursue kind of a non-traditional career in research outside of academia? And I will, again, refer this question to Gisèle and then Cody, if you'd like to speak to it since.
So that's a really good question. So from NSF's perspective, whatever you end up doing and contributing as a teacher, as a researcher, as and someone in business, in industry, it's all fine from NSF's perspective. So so your ultimate career goal is should be what it is. Now, the caveat that I'm going to throw in is that most of the reviewers are academics. They're not people from industry. We tried to bring in some industry people and people from other federal agencies to review, but it's really hard to get them to do it. So unfortunately, some professors are a little biased against that. So what I would do is carefully balance your, your ultimate career goals to include that, but maybe, just be aware that most of the reviewers are academics. I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think Gisèle hit that one on the head. Yeah, at the end of the day, broader impacts are broader impacts, and how you go about making a positive change on society, or how your research goes about making a positive change on society, whether that's from a biotech perspective or not, I really don't think is that big of a deal. I don't think there's too much more to say outside of what Gisèle said. I would just really emphasize the impacts that you're trying to make to society. And as long as the reviewers can appreciate that, I think at the end of the day, you should still be fine. You should still have a good chance, a competitive chance with everyone else, if you want to be honest about what your career path is. And I guess to add on to that, life changes unexpectedly. You might think that's your career path that you want right now. As I already mentioned before, my life changed in the matter of a week without having any expectation. So, I would just leave the door open too, in your application potentially. No one knows what their future holds for certain. So goals are great, but yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, I think that, discussing kind of, non-traditional paths or things that don't always involve academia is super important, since we're seeing that, like some of the most important, research can be done outside of academia. So thank you for your thoughts on that one. Now moving on to a question from Asher. Now Asher is interested in aerospace engineering and asks, I am applying to aerospace engineering programs, but one program I am applying to is interdisciplinary and is not strictly engineering. So I am wondering how much flexibility I'd have in changing my field of study, given that this interdisciplinary program is not a listed minor field of study. And once again, I will just go ahead and direct this question to Gisèle.
So under each of the major fields of study, there's an other where you can type in what your interest is. But if your main topic is going to be aerospace engineering, I would probably pick that. I don't know. I think maybe talk to some advisors about that choice. But you can, for each field of study, you can type in what you would like to do if it's slightly different, and it will get pooled with the most relevant other fields of study. So you could end up in aerospace, but you actually write something and other, and the reviewers would review you there. So you shouldn't think small that you are confined to what are the fields of study listed in the solicitation. If you really are doing something new and different, then you can use that other category. But keep in mind that you're not quite sure where NSF will put you in with, so in terms of the reviewers.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again. And now we'll just go ahead and move into some questions that we're getting live. So the first one that I'm seeing here is, should there be a separate section in our personal statement / research statement for intellectual merit and broader impacts? So I think this is actually something that is also helpful. I've seen in some of the examples that were mentioned on that website. So just for this person, I think that would be a helpful kind of framework. But I think that this actually might help us lead into kind of a conversation about how each of our panelists, how did you craft your personal and research statements, and how did you kind of divide up each one of those statements to address some of these kind of broader intellectual and broader impacts that the NSF wants to see. So let's go ahead and just maybe go in the order of Melissa, Ellen, Cody, and Rebecca.
Yeah, so I definitely don't think there's one specific way to do this. There's different ways that you can showcase like the broader impacts as well as the intellectual merit. In my research proposal, I did choose to have a specific section at the end that had broader impacts, just to kind of tie together how my research would have broader impacts, and just clearly include that. In terms of the personal statement, I did write it more like in a narrative format. So I didn't specifically break up intellectual merit and broader impacts. I instead kind of broke it up by describing my past experiences, and then another section describing like my future aspirations. And one thing I did that I felt just to kind of highlight some of those experiences was if there was something specifically related to like a broader impact or intellectual merit, I might have bolded that in my statement just to kind of highlight certain aspects. But I wrote that as more of a narrative.
Yeah, so in my research proposal, I had intellectual merit as kind of the main part of it, and then a little section about broader impacts at the end. And then in the personal statement, I actually had broader impacts as the first section, intellectual merit as the second, and then future goals as like a third section. And similarly to Melissa, did some strategic like bolding or underlining. Some people are against that for aesthetic reasons, but I do kind of feel like it helps to have certain things pop out in a 3-page wall of text. Yeah, I think that really you're trying to kind of create structure. So good advice that I had actually both for the Goldwater and for the NSF proposal were making it very clear kind of what your like thesis is to some extent. Like if you kind of think about like, what do you want your readers' main like takeaway points to be, that can be a helpful way of kind of thinking about having that near the beginning, and then everything else that you're saying almost kind of like supporting evidence for like why that's a reasonable goal or why it's important. And I feel like that's a reasonable kind of thesis is here's what I want to do and here's why it matters. And, here's why I'm qualified to do it. So yeah, I'll probably just leave it there.
All right. So the way that I went about my personal statement, I also did the structured way. I did not do the bolded text. My advisor at the time, my undergraduate advisor, was not for that. However, my current PhD advisor loves it. So it's a personal taste thing, whatever you like. So I started with the introduction, which was a snapshot of me, and just try to be very, very authentic. And I think one thing I just want to highlight here is I think a lot of people sometimes have this misconception that you have to have some like traumatic event or something that really separates you from other people, or have experienced some trauma, some critical issue in another country or something like that. I don't think that's necessary. I think with the introduction, they really just want to see maybe what drives you to this area, what kind of inspires you. And they can be little things. Like I just told a very like little story that about how the neighborhood I grew up in, and not some sort of like really rough neighborhood or anything like that. Just a little story about how like the creek in my neighborhood like dried up from a drought one summer. And that kind of led me to thinking about water and things like that. So for the intro, I just really wanted to emphasize I think a lot of just that goes into what inspires you. And then for the intellectual merit, it's just essentially the background as to, what you have to show or what you've done research wise, and then kind of the results of that. So feel free to like brag about yourself a little bit if you've gotten onto any papers, won any awards. I think that's really important to include so they can see what you've really accomplished. And then I spent a lot of time with the broader impacts, and that was also going back into everything that I've done, broader impacts as well, like how I've influenced the society. So I focused on my time in Fargo, and even before that. So I was a camp counselor for much of my high school years in youth education and conservation, and then that kind of continued on into my involvement in the Fargo community. And then I just kind of followed off with how I want, to pursue and continue doing that in the future. So I guess those were the main ways that I structured my personal statement.
It sounds like mine was kind of similar to Cody's. I started with just like a general introduction of like kind of where also like the main theme across my research proposal and my personal statement was just like my inspiration and like what led me to pursue science. So I started with just like a little story with that. But I did have like individual intellectual merit and broader impact headings in my personal statement, just because that's kind of the way it flowed. So then I just put like my research experience and like my research goals as well under my intellectual merit, just like where I thought I could see myself fitting in the field. And then broader impacts with like different types of things that I've done, but also I put my goals in there as well, and like how I want to be involved in the community throughout my career. And then for my research proposal, I believe I also had the separate headings where I put like the main body of my text just by itself. And then I specifically highlighted intellectual merit and broader impacts in mine in 2 separate paragraphs towards the end. But yeah, I think everything else is pretty similar.
Great. I know that those insider tips will be super, super helpful to everyone who's currently working on their applications. And Gisèle, I know this is a really hefty question to ask, but just so we can ask it, straight from the top. Do you have any, big pointers for applicants? Like, what do you think makes a successful application? And again, I know that's a very difficult thing to answer, but if you can give us like 1 or 2 things that you think are super important.
I think show who you are and also show your passion for science and engineering. So it can't all just be cut and dry. You have to, and show your personal contributions. So don't just talk about what your lab is doing, but show what you plan to do and how you plan to make a difference in the world. And be sincere and authentic. And proofread really carefully. Remember that they're reading 20 to 30 of these. So you want it well written, no typos. Yeah, you want to give proper attribution to people who have helped you along the way as well. So yeah, so and then look at your application as telling a complete story about you. So whatever's in your research statement should support what's in your personal statement and vice versa. And then have those reference letter writers support all of that in a really good way. And when you ask a reference writer, make sure you ask them if they can write a strong letter of recommendation. They're willing to put the time into helping you prepare that. So those would be the sort of take-home messages from our end. You see reviewers get really excited. Oh my gosh, this person wants to do this amazing stuff, and they have an amazing, it's very nice when you can excite someone to be supportive of your application.
Wonderful. Thank you again. So I think that kind of covers that question there and a couple of other questions I think we had. So next we have a question saying, let's see, just to clarify, you can only apply once as a graduate student, either as a first year or a second year. I think this actually ties into another question that we had that asked whether or not the panel would recommend applying as a master's student or as a PhD. So I will go ahead and again direct this question to Gisèle to kind of clarify some of the rules for us.
So it doesn't matter if you're in a master's program or a PhD. It just matters whether you are in your first year or second year of a graduate program. Okay. Now you may have taken lots of graduate classes as an undergraduate. Those don't count. You have to be in a graduate program, either in your first or second year. So if you're in a master's program, apply, because even if you applied as a second year master's, you could take that fellowship to a PhD program almost anywhere in the United States.
Wonderful. And then the next kind of, I think, big question that we got was, do you apply as a senior or as a graduate student? And I'll just ask the panelists again in the same order, Melissa, Ellen, Cody, and Rebecca, just to kind of, if you don't mind talking a little bit about, why you chose to apply when you did.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I applied actually during a gap year. So I was working for a year between undergrad and grad school. I thought this was a good time to apply because I had just sort of wrapped up my senior thesis research as an undergrad and had thought of some different ways I could sort of extend this research, and that would kind of lend nicely to a research proposal. I also felt like I just had more time then to apply. So I really liked taking the gap year. It really helped with like me taking time to apply for that NSF fellowship and then graduate programs. So that worked particularly well for me, but I know for different people, it might make more sense to apply in graduate school or whenever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say go ahead and apply as an undergrad because, you know, it doesn't hurt you. You can always apply again in grad school if you don't get it in undergrad. And having a practice round is certainly not a bad thing, even if it's disappointing at the time. Other just thoughts that I've had about applying as an undergrad. I did find it helpful having various mentors that I had built relationships with over my time at University of Colorado, who I could ask for letters, advice on the application itself, you know, kind of bouncing some ideas back and forth for the research proposal before I started writing it. So having those resources that you've already kind of identified or connections you've identified and built over the years can be helpful. One thing that I have seen some friends struggling with if they're applying for their first time in graduate school is you've kind of had a big shift often between where you were in undergrad and where you were as a grad student. And then there's kind of this tension between like, well, do I ask more people in grad school to write me letters of recommendation or people in undergrad? I haven't had as much time to kind of build the relationships with people at the grad school or haven't gotten as involved with things. So it obviously depends on the individual and their path, but those are some of the benefits to doing it in your senior year of undergrad or directly after graduation.
Yep, I think that was a great answer by Ellen. I guess just for my case, seeing as I'm a little bit an oddball case, I applied during my undergraduate. And for me, it just kind of boiled down to the decision of I really wanted to work with a particular individual. And I had to kind of weigh out that decision. And this individual is someone that didn't have any funding. So unless I had funding to get into his lab, I wasn't going to be able to do it. So it really kind of boiled down to, you know, if I want to go work with the person that I really dreamed of working with, you know, this is something that I kind of had to get beforehand. So that was a big reason for me.
I also applied as a senior undergrad, and I found it like everyone was saying, like really helpful to have like the connections and stuff. And as a first year PhD student, I don't know if I could handle applying right now because of like all the adjustment and everything. It's kind of a lot, and I don't know that many professors and stuff. And I also use like my undergraduate thesis as an extension, like not really. I proposed something completely different, but I used that as like background research towards my proposal, which I know just from talking from other students, a lot of senior undergrads have concerns of how to draw the line between like my undergrad work and what I'm proposing. And they think maybe it'd be easier to wait until you're a grad student. But personally, I thought it was easier to write it as an undergrad because you do have some experience in a field, and yeah, you can kind of leverage that towards your proposal and things.
Wonderful. Thank you again for sharing. And then I will also ask everyone here on the call, what do you see as the biggest benefit to the NSF-GRFP? Why apply to the NSF versus any other graduate school fellowship? And maybe we'll start with the panelists again, going in that same order, and then we'll finish with Gisèle.
I would say having a fellowship just generally has really given me time to sort of independently figure out what research questions I want to answer without having a lot of students in my department are funded with research assistantships or teaching assistantships, and being able to fully just dive into the research that I want to do and get a head start on dissertation work has been really important for me. I don't know too much about other fellowship opportunities that are available, so I can't necessarily comment on the similarities and differences, but if others have ideas, they should definitely share those.
I think my perspective is very similar to Melissa's, and just the flexibility that the fellowship affords students is incredible. Yeah, I would say, especially as a PhD student, having the ability even a little bit sooner in your graduate career to kind of start thinking more independently and coming up with what projects not only kind of fit with your advisor in their lab, but like things that you can kind of lead is an invaluable experience. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely echo that. And I guess the other big thing is just also the flexibility with who you get to work with or where you get to go. As I kind of mentioned before, to be really cut and dry, money talks, absolutely, especially NSF money. You pretty much, when you win it, you kind of have your choice, which is a really awesome thing. You have your choice with largely where you want to go and also what you want to do. Obviously, you're going to want to take guidance from the advisor as to what your research ends up being, because I will give a little bit of an aside from this. My research statement when I proposed my NSF is not really at all what I'm doing now. I'm still in the general same area of research, but I'm not doing that at all anymore. So that's just kind of an example of the flexibility of it. So
I think one aspect that's more related to like the application process that's really helpful is just like clarifying your goals and where you see yourself. But also the deadline is before grad school applications, so it makes grad school applications really easy. And then now that I'm in my program doesn't like match students with advisors. Everybody just gets to like kind of find an advisor as they are here. So it's really nice to know that I'm not limited by which professors are offering funding this year, because I do come with like some of my own funding. So it just like opens up even more possibilities.
So I would apply to GRFP, but apply to any other federal fellowship that you can apply to. So there are some other opportunities in Department of Energy. The NSF-GRFP is a fellowship that you can apply to if you're interested in math, computer science, physics. So there are other federal fellowships, and you might as well apply to all of them, but realize that if you get them all, you're going to have to only accept one. And so GRFP does offer a lot of flexibility. Some of the ones pay a bit more, but I mean, to be in the enviable position of having to make a choice is not so bad either. One of the things that I think is really important is that you establish a connection with NSF at an early stage in your career. You are our future scientists and engineers. The foundation has funded you and invested in you. And so you will be kind of tracked over time. People do evaluations of the program. In applying in getting the award, you will be followed by certain groups over time to see where you end up and what you do. So you become part of the NSF community, and that's something that's really important to establish at an early part of your career. So I know I'm always very proud of all the fellows that I've been able to support. And it's just been fantastic. It's fantastic to meet fellows, so thank you.
Thank you again for those insights. And I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. So now I'll just, as we're kind of wrapping things up, I'll just open it up and ask, are there any other parting thoughts, any final insights that we may not have covered previously that anyone would like to share with current and future applicants? All right, it looks like we've done a pretty thorough job tonight, asking all the different questions we can come up with. So if no one else has any other questions, we have several people saying thank you so much. And Absolutely, as we should be. Thank you all to all of our panelists so much for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing your insights, your stories. I know that, again, they will be extremely helpful to everyone. And to everyone watching, again, we will make all the materials shown tonight available. We will also be sending out a list of past NSF-GRFP recipients who would be happy to talk to you about your application, look over anything, and would be just great points of contact who are also Goldwater scholars. So if you would like to see that list, please join the NSF-GRFP channel in the Slack. If you just search up hashtag NSF-GRFP in our Slack or in our Slack workspace, you should be able to find it, and we'll be posting kind of all the follow-up from tonight there. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. And thank you to anybody watching live or not. And again, thank you to all of our panelists. It has been a pleasure talking to everyone. And I just want to wish everyone a lovely evening. Thank you again.